Hello and welcome to the Public Buyers Community Podcast, where we discuss all things public procurement. Today, we'll be looking at the slightly complex but nevertheless very important foreign subsidy regulation. Luckily, we have with us today two experts from the DG Grow team who are both working with the regulation to provide their insights. So I'd like to welcome Jurats Ortiz and Victor Delalo. Thank you very much for joining us today. So to provide a little bit of background to the regulation, if we could just kind of put it in some context, the regulation came into force in October of 2023. So could you give us some idea, Victor, please, of what the regulation was brought in to solve?
Of course. Hello, Steve. Hello, everyone. And thank you very much for the invitation. The FSR was based on pre-existing rules. In the EU, you have rules when a company cannot receive the money from a government that could give this company unfair advantage to it when it has activities within the European markets. So the FSR was created on this idea that if we have rule in the European Union, we should have rule also outside of the European Union for companies not to get financial contribution from outside member states that could give them an unfair advantage compared to European company. Any type of financial contribution, loans, grants, tax credits, if this gives the company an unfair advantage compared to European company, then it's forbidden. The real idea is to have a level playing field between European companies and companies that are outside of the European Union in order to have a really secure internal market. In the FSR, I think it's important to notice there is two different sides. One side is the concentration module that is being dealt with our colleagues from DG Com, and the other side is the public procurement module, the topic that is our interest today, that is being dealt with the DG Grow and the team in DG Grow, among who Jurats and I.
Thank you very much indeed, Victor, for that. So, Jurats, let's turn to you if we can. How big an issue were foreign subsidies for the public procurement sector? And I was wondering if there are any examples that you could give us of possibly where these subsidies may have distorted the internal market in the past.
Thank you. So the public procurement market in the EU accounts for over 14% of the GDP. This means that it provides important business opportunities for companies from the EU and from third countries. Our market is well regulated to ensure equal treatment, non-discrimination, transparency. However, over the last years, there were concerns over the existence of subsidies and unfair practices from companies that may benefit from government support, and thanks to that, they could compete with prices that distort competition. And let me come to the example. A region in the EU in 2019 awarded a contract for works in the transport sector to a state-owned non-EU company. The winning bid was 40% lower than the next lowest offered from the competitors. These are the type of market situations that raised the alarm. So at the time, we had no tool to investigate and address this unfair advantage. And that's why now, with our rules in FSR, we are allowed to act and to ensure a level playing field for all the companies that want to operate in our single market.
Thank you. Obviously, it's a very important change. So now that the regulation has been in force, have you seen any changes, especially in situations like these, or just generally?
Well, what we see is a steep learning curve, and that's normal. There are more than 250,000 public buyers in the EU, so it's difficult to ensure awareness and uniform application. However, together also with the efforts from member states, we are getting there. And on the other side of the coin, the economic operators, companies operating in this market were not used to providing this type of information, but now, little by little, they are integrating FSR into the company's operating procedures. It's taking time, but we see them learning, adapting, and complying with the requirements.
Victor, are there any kind of figures available at the moment to demonstrate how this is going?
Yes, absolutely. Now that the regulation, you have mentioned it, Steve, has been in place for a year, we have a little bit of a feedback of what happens. We have received in 1 year 1,600 notification and declaration from companies participating in more than 200 public procurement procedures. These are high numbers, maybe higher than we anticipated. However, it's to take into consideration the fact that these numbers are not even complete. Today, the FSR team has a problem of non-notification. There is a problem that some public procurement procedures happening in the European Union that are within the framework of this regulation are not being notified to the European Commission, which is a little bit problematic because it means that the regulation is not in place in every member state as it should be. But it's improving. We are working on this with the contracting authority. Rogat has mentioned that there's 250,000 contracting authority in Europe. It means that every single one of these contracting authority, if they have a contract that falls within the framework of the regulation, has to notify to the European Commission. So it's a real challenge to put this regulation in place. And I hope that in the coming years, it will be much better.
Are there any particular sectors, Rogat, that you feel or you've seen are more vulnerable to this kind of distortion?
All sectors are potentially affected by foreign subsidies, but indeed, as you point out, in public procurement, in some sectors, we see that there is more foreign competitors than in others. At the time of the impact assessment, the stakeholders mentioned sectors such as railway, maritime technology, and construction. And over the last year, in all these 1,600 submissions, we have seen those, but we have also seen transport, including rail. We have seen public transport, energy infrastructure, IT, health sector. So this gives you a little bit of the overview of the many sectors that are reaching us.
Victor, if you would, let's get into the specifics here. Could you briefly explain under what conditions a notification must be made in the context of public procurement? So, for example, is it to do with the total value of the contract, the amount of subsidy? How does that work?
No, it's absolutely, it has to do with both. So if you're a contracting authority and that you're doing a public procurement procedures above the threshold of 250 million euros, and that's within, I'm sorry to be very precise, but I think that's important, and that's one of your lots of this public procurement procedures is above the threshold of 125 million euros, then you are under the threshold of the foreign subsidy regulation. You have to integrate within the public procurement procedures directly the obligation that all the economic operators that are willing to participate in these public procurement procedures are doing a declaration or a notification to the European Commission. If I'm an economic operator and I know that I haven't received foreign contribution of more than 4 million euros in the past 3 years to be precise, then I don't have to declare anything to the European Commission. I fill out a form of paper saying I declare that I've received no foreign financial contribution in the past 3 years. However, if I'm an economic operator and I know that I've received foreign financial contribution in the past 3 years, I need to declare it to the European Commission. I need to make a notification that I have received these amounts. And then it's a more complex document that need to be filled out. There is many information that you need to fill in, but the essential is that you declare the amounts or the estimated amounts, the country of origin, and type of foreign financial contribution. Is it a loan? Is it the tax credits? Is it any type of contribution that has been granted by your third countries outside of the EU? So that's the overview of the process. I just want to add that the Commission is allowed to ask any information within this framework. So if you're an economic operators and that we see that we haven't declared anything, the Commission may ask questions to you.
So I'm an economic operator and I have to make a notification. What is it that I can do to make that process as smooth as possible? Rogat, if you'd like to.
Well, the first thing is that you would need to be familiar with the requirements of the FSR. For that, in our website, there is practical information. There are questions and answers, specific instructions on how to fill out the forms and communicate with the Commission. And we also encourage to contact us to submit a pre-notification if you would like specific assistance with their submission. So the message is go through whatever is available, but then we are, of course, always open to reply to questions by email or through this pre-notification procedure.
Okay, so let's follow this through to its next stage. The notification has been made to the Commission. So, Victor, could you talk us through the decision-making process now that the Commission has to go through when that notification has been received or there's a suspicion that there is foreign subsidy here? So what kind of processes do they go through? I'm thinking of things like the balancing test, etc. If you could enlighten us a little bit on that.
Of course, when the Commission receives notification or declaration from economic operators, it has 20 working days to take a decision. The decision can be different, but the two main ones are a decision not to do anything. So the Commission is saying, okay, I'm not seeing anything that is suspicious. The public procurement procedures can go ahead as planned. The second option is to open an in-depth investigation. Opening an in-depth investigation means that you have suspicion that a company has benefited from foreign financial contribution that could be considered as subsidies. So this is the first element that the Commission will keep in mind. Is this contribution potentially a subsidy? Is it potentially distortive to the tender that the company is proposing in this public procurement procedures? And then, you have mentioned it already, it's a balancing test. Did this money that was received by this company, what is the positive effect of it? Does this positive effect outweigh the negative effects that it can have within the framework of the public procurement procedures? Then, once we have all of this information, we can take a decision. The decision can be very simple, which is to say, there is no distortion. We believe that this company has received money, but that it's safe to go. The public procurement procedures can go ahead. Second option is to put redressive measures, is to say to the company, you have benefited from this money, but you need to pay it back. And the third option is kind of the nuclear option, is to say you are forbidden to participate in this public procurement procedures because we believe that the money that you have received is too important for you and that the impact on it, on the bids that you have proposed, is too important as well. So these are all the elements to keep in mind when the Commission is launching an investigation.
You guys, from what Victor just described there, it does seem that the Commission has some discretion as to how it will respond to the situation, from nothing at all to what Victor described as the nuclear option. Do you feel that the rules are clear enough? The guidelines are not due to be published, I understand, until the beginning of 2026. Is there anything that you feel should go into those guidelines that would help improve the process, especially as regards public procurement?
Indeed, the FSR remains challenging for many companies to understand, and the upcoming guidelines will aim at clarifying certain points. However, the ongoing education and awareness raising for both companies and contracting authorities is even more important. We understand that we have to try to minimize administrative burdens on companies, but at the same time, the economic operators need to understand that the Commission needs sufficient information to conduct investigations effectively. We are at the beginning of the implementation. Many of the tools that the rules offer also have not yet been used, but I believe that the cases and the practice will bring us through the next stages and bring us then to 2026.
So, Victor, the regulation requires, especially as regards public procurement and possible delays, the Commission is kind of bound to bear in mind the award dates for public tenders. So as, for example, not to unfairly disadvantage SMEs who wish to submit a tender. How practical are those kind of limits in real terms?
That's a very important point, because I think that's a point that we get a lot from the contracting authority, and it's completely normal for them to be worried that this can have a negative impact in the deadlines. There is two things to take into consideration. The first thing is that we have very short investigation deadlines. The Commission has 20 working days for preliminary review. Once it opens an in-depth investigation, as I was mentioning earlier, it has only, because it's not a lot for the Commission, but still it's quite a lot of time, only 110 days for open procedures and 90 days for multi-stage procedures. This was created by the co-legislator in order to limit as much as possible the negative impact that the FSR can have on award dates. The second element to keep in mind is that we want to give as much flexibility as possible for the contracting authority to implement the FSR and to integrate it within the framework of their public procurement procedures. So we want to be as flexible as possible with them. We want to engage in discussion with them, and we want to be, even if the legal requirements are here, to be as understandable as possible with them in order not to avoid to really just delay the procedure. On the SMEs, the one very last point, I think that the SME question is really a centerpiece. We have made simplified declaration for the SMEs, as most of them have not received foreign financial contribution. So it should not avoid them to participate in public procurement procedures. But this is something that we have, of course, at all the moment in mind.
Yeah, it's a very important point. Thank you. As we start now to come towards the end, I'd like us to look a little bit towards the future. We now have this regulation which is in force. Hugues, are there any areas where you feel that action is still needed to prevent distortion and make sure that competition in the internal market, especially for public procurement, is still fair?
Well, the FSR is part of a big toolbox. The Commission has a number of trade defense instruments in place, for example, the anti-subsidy policy for imports. We also continue to address distortive subsidies through the rules in our bilateral trade agreements. In short, the foreign subsidies regulation complements other existing tools and ensures a level playing field in the single market.
So, final question there, this to both of you. Obviously, the foreign subsidies regulation is still in early days, and there's a lot of information to still be gathered and to see the effects of it over time. So 10 years from now, what effect do you think this regulation will have had?
I think I will start to give my personal opinion on the matter, and I will let Hugues complete. For me, I think we will have in 10 years really an integration of the FSR within the way of functioning of the companies. The companies will know about the FSR. They will know the requirements under the FSR. And even if the FSR might change a little bit in the future, this will be integrated completely. And the second element, and I think that's it's something that we really need to take into consideration, they will be case law. And case law will be the main elements that will allow to us to put the FSR in practice in maybe another way. Case law is centerpiece for today for the European Commission when it comes to state aid, for example. And I think that it will be likely very the same for the FSR. We will create a legal framework that is not only based on the requirements we have today with the regulation, but also on practice, and on practice judged by the European Commission and the Court of Justice.
10 years sounds like a long time, especially in the current global economy and how fast things move. I don't know how it will work by then. However, I know that for sure it will be one of the tools that will accompany the EU in our path to regain competitiveness and strengthen our internal market. And that's what us, Victor and myself and the whole team here in the eGrow and also our colleagues in COMP, we are striving for every day in our work.
I wish you the best of luck with it. It is a very important task that you have ahead of you to ensure fair competition within the market. So I'd like to thank you both very much for your time today and for sharing your expertise and experience, both of which are very important. For those of you who are listening, if you'd like to hear more expert information about issues related to public procurement, don't forget to check back to see what other podcasts are available. But for now, thank you very much for listening to this episode, and we hope you'll join us again soon.